Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.
Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Welcome to our first show of 2021. Thanks for tuning in all these years. This week we'll be bringing you some of our favorite stories from the past year. First up, 2020 brought its own set of weather and economic challenges for farmers and ranchers. So what can we do to keep our farms profitable in the long term? Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh has more on this story.
In the ever-changing world of agriculture, it can be difficult to plan ahead. Dwayne Beck, manager of the Dakota Lakes Research Farm in South Dakota, says that in order to move forward, we must first look back.
Yeah, it's really more of a look at where we've been in agriculture. We've only really been growing crops for 10 or 11,000 years on purpose. Before that, we were hunter-gatherers and things. And why have we gotten to where we are? Because we've got to figure out where we're going. If we keep trying to do what we're doing now, it just isn't going well. A lot of it from an ecosystem standpoint and economic standpoint. I mean, one of the little tidbits is Washington and Jefferson and Hamilton were exchanging letters in the late 1700s saying if we don't do something to better care for our soils in the eastern seaboard, we'll be forced to move westward to find soils that aren't degraded. The Louisiana Purchase, you know, is just like, oh, well, okay, we don't have to fix our problem because we got more land out here. And we're kind of out of land now. We just keep kind of throwing Band-Aids on and hoping that the patient will live, and maybe we need to go back and say, what do we need to do?
In order to start the healing process, Dwayne says we need to get to the root of the problem and start asking, what happens now?
Well, the big one is ecosystem degradation. The soils, and whenever man comes in and starts farming, the soils and the water systems get all screwed up, and we start having droughts and flooding, and that's because we've degraded soils. And that's not just here. I mean, that's been all over the world. And it's more of a philosophical thing. Not that I have answers. I have questions. Like, do we really want to do this? And how much energy do we use to do this? And what happens when the energy goes away? Or, you know, half the corn produced right now in the Midwest goes to ethanol. What happens in 25 years if we have electric cars? And we don't burn ethanol. See, it's some of those like, oh gee, now what?
While the questions still remain unanswered, Dwayne has started working on his own solutions at the research farm, including growing his own fuel.
The native prairie would be our guide. And so what we're trying to do is not export stuff. The native prairie didn't really export stuff, and it didn't have to import stuff. So we're trying to close the circle in terms of our farming operations, in terms of energy, water, nutrient cycling, water cycling, energy capture. And so making our own oil is one of those. Now I can sell that as human edible oil also, canola and flax, or I can burn it if I need to. If I can get rid of having to burn it and have a solar powered tractor, that'd be great too.
And Dwayne believes that by learning from the past, we'll find the answers we seek by rethinking the questions entirely.
What that tells us about where we should possibly be going, it may mean totally reevaluating some of our concepts.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Thanks, Maddie. The Dakota Lakes Research Farm is completely owned and operated by farmers and often works in conjunction with South Dakota State University. We've got more on the Market Journal website. Next up, farming and ranching have evolved in countless ways in the last several decades. However, one component of that evolution that's somewhat overlooked is the ever-growing utilization of social media platforms in various ag industries. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has more.
Growing up in a world of message boards and dial-up internet, I've seen the internet grow in simply unimaginable ways. On that note, the advent of social media has given rise to an entirely new avenue of connectivity, perfectly suited for people to publish and gather information or just share some personal insights. In a world that's become so fast-paced, where we can order virtually anything we want and be greeted with a package on our doorstep overnight, is a pretty big step from ordering that perfect gift via catalog, if anyone even remembers what those are. But the point is, with such a fast-paced way of life, the disconnect between producers and consumers seems to have grown in many ways. I had the opportunity to speak with social media expert Natalie Kovarik at this year's Women in Ag conference, and she tells me with the use of social media, many industries are given an opportunity to share and grow their image and brand, while simultaneously closing the social divides between those who make the products and those who purchase them.
I think it's doing a very good job of connecting producers and consumers back together. I think, unfortunately, society, we've kind of drifted away, and there is just a disconnect and kind of a little bit of a gap. And producers now are stepping up, and they are using the platforms of social media to help kind of bridge that and tell their story and kind of share what's going on in rural America with those that aren't privy to seeing it every day. That's the beautiful thing about social media. You can use the platform for a lot of different things. If you simply just want to get on there and share your story and show, the humanity that goes into raising beef, or what goes into, planting fields and what we do every day as ranchers and farmers, it's a beautiful platform to, visually to tell that and just show up and actually show people. But there's also ways to monetize and you can make income from, which is really big for some ranching and farming operations to have a little bit of an off-ranch income.
It seems like there's some type of new social media platform for people and industries to utilize popping up online on a daily basis. While this means of communication is still in its upward trend, people have a seemingly infinite choice of which platform will best suit their needs. However, the choice you make on the platforms to participate on are entirely up to you. In the long run, there really isn't a wrong choice, and in many ways, it boils down to your personal preferences.
I don't think so. I think they all kind of have their own little different niche. I mean, I do think across the board there's a lot of similarities between the different platforms. I think it's kind of what you're drawn to. I am most active on Instagram and YouTube, and those are the kind of the two that I choose to spend my time on. But that's not to say that you can't have a very large influence and do a good job of sharing on different ones like Twitter and Facebook and all the other ones. So I think it's just kind of what you're drawn to and what connects with you about the difference between them.
While social media has become a social normalcy in everyday life, that doesn't mean everyone interacts in the most courteous or socially acceptable ways. While social media is filled with wonderful stories and images, the anonymity provided to any given social media platform members do inevitably produce some very harsh interactions between people and gives internet trolls a handful of verbal ammunition. With that in mind, Natalie did have some very specific do's and don'ts to share about your social media practices.
I think do's are serving your audience, being there, showing up for the people that are there following you, supporting you, engaging with you. And I think a big do is also turning it into a community and really viewing those people that are choosing to follow you and give you their time, as a person, and recognizing and connecting with them. Don'ts, I think we have to be better about sharing our stories in encouraging ways. I know a lot of people have trouble relating to people in ranching and farming because we're so set in our ways, or we take offense to things and we're very passionate about things. And I think we just have to be better about. My good friend Amanda Radke, she's really big into advocating, and she always talks about finding common ground and really connecting with people before we even start talking about ranching and farming and the statistics and all the things we want to share about it. But really just kind of being more approachable.
For those who missed their opportunity to hear Natalie speak at this year's Women in Ag conference, I wanted to leave you with her thoughts on why this is an important topic and what she wanted attendees to walk away with after her presentation.
Just that everyone has a story to share from agriculture, and that to really encourage and empower people to share that. We make up, people in agriculture make up about 2% of the population. And that's very minuscule when you think of it in the grand scale compared to the 98% that aren't on a ranch or aren't on a farm or just removed from that lifestyle. And so I just want to be here to encourage people to utilize the platform of social media to really tell and share their story.
As the trend of social media keeps following its upward momentum, the opportunities to grow your personal image and brand will continue to be an integral part of how people and businesses interact for the foreseeable future. If anything is evident, it's the fact that social media has become a platform for the masses. and that includes industries like agriculture. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. Next up, early last year, Market Journal was invited by the Nebraska Wheat Board for a 3-day workshop at the Wheat Marketing Center in Portland, Oregon. We learned a lot, but one of the more interesting stories there centers around a piece of machinery that got its start right here in Nebraska. And this machine uses wheat grown in Nebraska and other parts of the world to create new foods that feed the world and expand the export market. In 2016, representatives from the Nebraska Wheat Board helped in arranging a new home for a tortilla maker that was no longer being used by the University of Nebraska's Food Science Department. Its destination? Portland, Oregon, and the state's Wheat Marketing Center laboratory. The Wheat Marketing Center was formed in 1988 by 7 states, including Nebraska, and its lab services provide education and research to connect growers and customers. And that research includes hard red winter wheat, a crop that helps shape Nebraska's ag industry and is also a key export in the Pacific Northwest.
Hard red winter is the largest class of wheat being grown in the U.S., and it's utilized in so many different products across the spectrum, everything from steam bread to noodles to pan bread and other things. And we do research and training on many of these items. So we'll be showing hard red winter to customers throughout the year and encouraging them to use it as part of their blend in their products.
Partners of the WMC, like wheat breeders at UNL, send in wheat samples for the lab to test. Those results are later made into a report. For Wheat Innovation Manager Bon Lee, getting quality wheat from Nebraska and having equipment like the tortilla line is a game changer in developing consumer-friendly products.
The tortilla has been really a good fit for us, and we do the wheat and flour testing, and tortilla is one of the biggest or the growing market in the United States. So it became a boom, and that's when we got started with the tortilla testing.
Bon estimates about 1,000 tortillas are produced each month at the lab. A lot of trial and error is involved, but it's all part of the process in understanding what consumers want and meeting their demands.
We prepare the dough and we divide and roll each piece, and then each piece goes, it's rested a little bit, and each piece goes to a hot press. So without the hot press, if you just press it, especially tortilla, which requires harder or stronger gluten, that when you press it, the dough bounces back. So the hot press, you just keep the shape. So, and then the finished baking.
How quick is the process from beginning to end?
Probably less than a minute.
We have to change belt speeds a little bit depending on the dough and how it handles.
Dr. Jayne Bock, the WMC's technical director, says one of the things they're particularly concerned about is making sure the wheat varieties they test maintain the quality standards already put into place, or even push the bar higher. It's necessary in sustaining the export market and making sure farmers in Nebraska and elsewhere are growing wheat the world wants to buy.
Even though we are in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of grain from Nebraska gets exported through our ports. And so we want to make sure that we're staying on top of what's happening in Nebraska and trying to do what we can to improve the wheat quality coming out of Nebraska for the export market, to make sure that the demand is always there, that we can justify the higher price that we can get in the export market, and we just maintain those relationships with our overseas customers.
The American wheat farmer is known for growing the best wheat in the world, and that's a message that we help get out to our customers. Nebraska exports wheat both through the Pacific Northwest and the Gulf, but the main message that we're getting out is that the quality wheat that the U.S. grows is in high demand, And we want to keep that demand by encouraging growers to continue to grow the quality wheat.
Bon also told me that he understands a farmer's main concern is yield, but that quality should be a very close second. He also says he hopes Nebraska can grow more hard white winter wheat each year, so more testing can be done on it. If you'd like to learn more about the Wheat Marketing Center, we've got their information on the Market Journal website. Next up, after 50 years of successful dairying and participating in numerous leadership roles on local boards and state agricultural organizations, Dave Merman of Glenville retired from his dairy operation and continued a partnership in the family farm with his brother Jim. In 2019, Merman also took a leap into state politics, taking the oath of office as a state senator representing District 38. You can read about what it's like to be a farmer and a legislator in the January Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. This week, Al sat down with Market Journal's Bill Dodd to talk about the top 5 weather events that impacted ag in 2020.
Well, Bill, since we've now moved into 2021, and like everybody else, we always have our top list, and I thought it would be a good chance for us to look at what I consider to be the top 5 events, climate events during 2020 that had a significant impact on agriculture. And for the number 5 position, I would have to say that the spring planting was a big issue. We've been dealing with a lot of wet, cool springs since the 2012 drought, and in this year we finally had a decent, warm April for the southeastern 2/3 of the state. And so by the time we got to May 10th, we already were at 80% of the corn planted and 50% of the soybeans planted. And if it wasn't for the wetness in north central Nebraska, from the carryover from all the excessive rainfall and the very cold conditions across the panhandle, it's very possible, if they had had the similar conditions as eastern Nebraska, that we could have been fairly wrapped up by the middle of May in terms of corn and soybean planting. For the position number 4 in this top 5, I have to look at the fall harvest period as the big story. And if you look at what we experienced in terms of weather delays, there really wasn't much. In fact, what we're going to talk about in position 2 is the only weather delays we had during the fall. And by the time we got to the end of October, we were virtually wrapped up on our corn harvest and our soybean harvest and our sorghum harvest. In fact, what I consider the 95% harvested acreage by the time we got the first release in November, all 3 of these crops had met that criteria. And they averaged a full 2 weeks ahead of the 5-year average. Bill, everybody remembers the big derecho event in Iowa during August that caused a significant amount of damage to the corn crop. We had a similar event here in Nebraska that really didn't get as much play, but was fairly devastating to those that were impacted. The evening of July 7th through the morning of July 8th, a line of thunderstorms developed in western Nebraska and rolled rapidly toward the east across southern Nebraska, and primarily impacted most areas south of the Interstate I-80 corridor. We had wind speeds ranging anywhere from 75 to estimates it up to 100 miles per hour. We had a couple of our ASAW stations that did verify winds in the 92 to 95 mile per hour range. Well, my number 2 position would be the 2 snowstorms that occurred this fall period. One, Labor Day week, highly unusual to get snowfall accumulations in early September, especially the first week of September. More importantly, the second snowstorm that occurred the 3rd week of October was a doozy of a snowstorm that come down the front side of the Rocky Mountains, bringing Arctic air all the way down into Texas. And the reason why this is so important, one, it was the first significant moisture event, helped put some decent moisture into the surface across the panhandle to help get up wheat that had not emerged yet, stop the wildfires in Colorado and Wyoming, but more importantly, we've seen a minus 14-degree low that was recorded at Alliance, and from everything I can tell, it looks like it was the coldest minimum low temperature ever recorded in October since records began in the early 1890s. Bill, it's not a surprise to anybody that the drought was the number 1 issue this year, and it will likely be one of the top 5 next year. We started at the beginning of May, when we were planting. We had just a semblance of some abnormally dry conditions in portions of the southwest and southern panhandle. We've seen rapid dryness expand during the summer and really invade eastern Nebraska. So now we are sitting at the end of the year, and we have 25% of the coverage in the state in what we would call D3 or extreme drought, 25% in D2, which is severe drought, and further 46 to 47% that are in moderate drought conditions. So whether we get improving conditions going forward or conditions deteriorate, we will be talking about this drought issue next year at the same time.
Thanks for that information, guys. Next up, backgrounding is the growing phase following weaning up until a calf goes to the feedlot. Producers might look to background calves to capture some extra weight gain while not adding fat. Additionally, backgrounding allows you to market the calves when the timing is more favorable. Nebraska Beef Extension Educator Erin Laborie says a backgrounding program can be anywhere from 60 days to 6 months.
So backgrounding programs are going to vary greatly among the operation. It's going to come down to what that producer's goal is and when they want to market those calves. Different things like what feed resources they have available that they can market through those calves, and what their desired average daily gain is for those calves. If you have corn silage available that you could feed in a total mixed ration, and you have the equipment and the facilities available to deliver total mixed ration to those calves, you could do that. There's always the option of grazing corn residue and annual forages. You could graze them on native winter range and supplement them with some distiller's grains. A backgrounding diet is typically more forage based and therefore lower in energy than our traditional feeding or finishing diets. And so like I said, maybe if you want to grow those calves at a ½ pound a day, you could graze them on native winter range and supplement 1.5 pounds of distiller's grains. Or if you want to grow them more around 2.5 pounds per day, you could feed them a corn silage based diet with some distillers as well.
Erin also says that if you're considering retaining ownership and backgrounding those calves, it's important to evaluate the cost of gain versus the value of gain and whether that's cost effective for your operation. Finally today, when buying new bulls for the upcoming season, there's some things you might want to do before putting them in the pasture. Taylor Grussing, Special Projects Manager with Vytelle, has a checklist for managing your new bulls and helping them succeed. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh has the story.
So when we bring new bulls home to an operation, it's usually a good idea to adjust them from a concentrate ration to a more forage-based ration, as they won't be getting delivered feed in a feed bunk anymore. And when we turn them out to pasture, obviously they'll need to be able to travel, maintain weight, and get their nutrients out of the grass. And so adjusting them to more of a forage-based ration is one of the first things we want to do leading up to the breeding season. And we also want to keep them gaining weight at about 1.5 to 2 pounds a day, which will hopefully set them up to a body condition score of a 6 as we go into the breeding season.
The bulls also need to get accustomed to each other to ensure they spend more time breeding and less time fighting.
Anytime we bring new bulls to an operation, we always want to make sure that they are adjusted to each other. And so this should take place prior to the breeding season in a structurally sound pen, so that way they can kind of determine the pecking order of themselves, as younger yearling bulls may not get along with the older mature bulls. And also when we go to turn them out to pasture, then we can consider doing pasture breeding situations with maybe multiple yearling bulls in a pasture together, or we can have some of the mature bulls only in a pasture together, so that way we aren't having maybe some of that social dominance issues. But we also know that sometimes we only buy 1 or 2 yearling bulls a year and we need to mix them with mature bulls. So as long as they've seen each other and kind of adjusted to each other before the breeding season, hopefully we'll have a successful pregnancy rate.
Taylor suggests watching the new bulls while they're in their pens, as well as getting them checked over by a veterinarian at least 2 months before breeding season.
Structural integrity of the bulls is very important to assess prior to the breeding season as well as through the entire breeding season, as we need them to be physically fit and sound on their feet and legs in order to travel the pastures and breed the cows successfully. We can start assessing this in large pens if they're in the dry lot prior to the breeding season, but we also want to make sure the veterinarian is checking that out during their breeding soundness exam. Breeding soundness exams should take place at least 30 days, if not 60 days ahead of the breeding season. This is because the spermatogenesis process takes 60 days to occur, so any kind of injury or insult that may have happened 60 days ago could be affecting the semen quality of those bulls. And so if you can assess if the bulls are in good semen quality ahead of the breeding season, then we will have time to replace bulls if they do not pass the breeding soundness exam, or also just have the confidence that going into the breeding season, your bulls are ready to go.
Taylor also stresses that the breeding soundness exam is very important because it will ensure the bulls are viable and ready to be bred.
The breeding soundness exam will assess the physical conformation of the bulls as well as the semen quality with motility and morphology. So as I mentioned, they'll assess the vision, smell, legs of the bulls, as well as measure their reproductive organs or palpate their reproductive organs. And then they'll also take a semen sample, and this will assess the motility and the morphology of the semen quality. And bulls need to have at least a 30% motility score to pass a breeding soundness exam, and that's with progressive head-first movement of those sperm cells. And then they also need a 70% morphology score to pass the exam, and this is with normal sperm cells that would be physically capable of fertilizing the ovum. So they have to have a 30% and a 70% to pass, and if they don't, they can be retested in 2 to 4 weeks to potentially allow new semen to mature. But also, if they fail, then they can hopefully be replaced by that breeder before the breeding season starts.
For more information on introducing new bulls to your operation, contact your local extension office. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Thanks, Maddie. Taylor says following this checklist will help breeders ensure their bulls are ready to go for the season and help to avoid potential revenue loss. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show, first show of 2021. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching, and Happy New Year.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.